Have you ever heard an English phrase that just had you so confused because you knew it was an idiom, but you're like, how did English speakers come to say that? That is so strange. Well, in today's English lesson, I'm going to teach you 12 of those phrases that are just strange idioms and things that American English speakers often say that really have no context to why we say it. I'm going to explain it, provide some examples, so then when you're speaking with native English speakers in an everyday conversation, you'll know exactly what these really strange, very bizarre idioms actually mean. Let's get started with today's lesson. The first phrase, you'll have to let me know if you have a phrase that is very similar to this phrase in your native language or your first language. The phrase, let me get ready to demonstrate, is I've had it up to here.
I've had it up to here.
Where is here? What does that mean? Well, this phrase is very common to hear when you are young, speaking English, to hear your mom or your dad say it when they are very irritated or very frustrated. You might hear a teacher say this as well. It's basically just meaning that you have a lot of anger and it's almost like building up in your body. Your frustration is as high as your head. We're just expressing how frustrated or angry we are by saying, I've had it up to here, and usually we say with you or with your behavior. So an adult wouldn't typically say this to another adult, and it's really not even a nice thing to say to children, but it is a common phrase. I've had it up to here with this. You can say this to another person, or you can say it about something like, I've had it up to here with this rain outside. I just want some nice weather so I can go out and go for a walk and enjoy the day. So this just means you're frustrated with how much rain or how much bad weather that you've had. If you had a boss that was very frustrated with you, they might say, I've had it up to here with you being late to work. This just means they're very frustrated. The frustration and anger has built up. If you haven't noticed, whenever English speakers say this phrase, we usually have to have a hand gesture. I've had it up to here. This is an idiom I am so surprised I haven't taught before because it's very common, but it's also very strange. If you're familiar with billiards, for instance, pool, you will know there is an 8-ball in the game. And in English, a very common phrase that we say is, we are behind the 8-ball. This phrase just basically has the meaning of you are in a very difficult situation. In the game of pool, when there is an 8-ball, it is seen as an obstacle because you cannot knock that 8-ball into one of the holes in the pool table because then you will lose. So it's basically we're an obstacle, we're at a disadvantage. We often say the phrase, I'm behind the 8-ball if we aren't finishing something in time and we're going to be disadvantaged. So for instance, maybe, you have some applications to jobs that are due very soon. They'll be closing the application soon, but if you haven't already done them, if you didn't do it early, you're probably already behind the 8-ball. This means you have a disadvantage. Listen for this English phrase, behind the 8-ball. I think you will be so surprised about how often you're hearing it when English speakers are in daily conversations. This next phrase, I couldn't tell you why we use it, who we're talking about, but again, when English speakers are frustrated, we say this very, very strange phrase. And I think a lot of these strange phrases just come from saying anything when you're frustrated. So the phrase is, for Pete's sakes, or sometimes English speakers will say, oh, for Pete's sakes.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
And this is better than saying a swear word or saying, oh my God, oh my goodness, because that can be seen as offensive to people who are religious. So to avoid using strong language, when we're frustrated, we just tend to say, oh, for Pete's sakes, for Pete's sakes. And it's just a very, very strange phrase, but literally the only reason we use it is just to be not offensive and to just use a phrase when we're frustrated. Let me know what your version of this phrase is in your language if you have another weird name like Pete that you say when you're frustrated. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, well, the proof is in the pudding.
Now, if you're not familiar with pudding, it's this sugary dairy cold dessert that we eat a lot in the United States. Not a lot, but some people really enjoy it. Chocolate pudding is always very good. It's a bit different than ice cream, if you're familiar with pudding. I don't know if you are or not. But this phrase, the proof is in the pudding, all it means is that you have to try something or experience something in order to judge it, in order to say if it's good. So this phrase, apparently the origin is actually a longer sentence to say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So this means that you have to try a food to know if you actually like it. Why are we using pudding as the example? And why are we saying that there's proof of something in pudding? I don't know. It's one of those really strange ones with no exact origin. But if you want to say that you need to try something, experience something in order to actually make a judgment on it, you can say, well, the proof is in the pudding. Sometimes when there's a lot of work that needs to be done around my house, maybe there's laundry, dishes, vacuuming, other cleaning, I will say to my husband, let's divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer.
This is a really strange phrase. It seems really dramatic, like you're going to conquer a whole country or something. You're going to war. But we use this really just in everyday context to say that we are going to divide up the work. We're going to split it up and try to finish it successfully. So you will even hear this phrase used in a business or professional context. Let's divide and conquer. That means let's break up the work and finish it up. So we use this really dramatic phrase in order to say we're going to finish some work by dividing it. And this phrase comes from the Roman phrase in Latin, divide et impera, which just means that they need to conquer their empire. They need to maintain control. So this is a very dramatic phrase that now has just made it into our everyday English life of saying divide and conquer in order to finish some tasks or business or whatever it may be. Sometimes when someone is talking and they start talking about really small details and they get into all of these different stories and tangents that really have nothing to do with the main subject that you're talking about or the problem that you're trying to figure out, you can describe the way that this person is talking by saying they were getting into the weeds. So this is a really interesting phrase, a really interesting idiom that just literally means that someone is speaking in a lot of details. They're talking about a lot of really small things besides the main point. Sometimes you might need to refocus your group or refocus your coworkers, and you need to start talking about the big problem that you're dealing with or you're trying to solve. And you might say to them, let's not get into the weeds of every little problem. Let's focus on the big problem. And we don't know the exact origin of who said this phrase first in English, but we can guess that this phrase comes from the idea that if you get too far into the woods off your main path, it becomes very difficult to walk and keep moving forward. So you don't want to get into the weeds. You want to focus on the main thing. This next phrase in English is pour cold water on something. When you pour cold water on something, you're kind of discouraging someone or something from pursuing an idea. So if you think that you have a great plan, your idea is great, but then your boss comes in and says, well, that will never work. That's a terrible idea. You can say, wow, you really poured cold water on my plan. This is a really common way just to say that they discourage something. Or if someone is a huge fan of something, maybe they really, really like a TV show, and you say, oh, the TV show is terrible. It's made for little kids. I don't know why you like it. They could say, well, you don't have to pour cold water on something that I like. So just being discouraging is what we say, pour cold water on something is what we mean. Another phrase that's really similar to this one that really means the exact same, that's also very strange, is to rain on someone's parade. So we think of someone having a lot of enthusiasm, like fire or like a flame, and when we pour cold water on it, we extinguish it or we get really dismissive about something that they like or something that they want to pursue. Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Shooting themselves in the foot, let them.
Now, this strange phrase can only come from the idea of someone using a firearm or a gun and being very careless about it. and injuring themselves by maybe shooting themselves in the foot. In everyday English, we use this phrase to mean don't do something to harm yourself on accident. Be very careful. Maybe you think you are ready to get a new job and try to make more money, but if you quit your current job before getting a new job, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. So you might be doing something that is not good for you, harming yourself. So we use this idiom in a very figurative context to mean don't do something that's going to harm you or put you at a disadvantage in the end. This next idiom is definitely a sports idiom. It comes from the sport of golf. When someone is going to try to make the golf ball into the golf hole, there is usually a par, or the amount of shots that should be taken in order to get the ball into the hole. And if you are above par, you're not very good because it took you a lot of different shots to get the ball into the hole. And if you're below par, that means you're very good because you did it better than the average person. If you're on par, it means you're exactly as you predicted you should be in golf. The way that we use this phrase on par in everyday life, it means that you're meeting the exact expectations of something. If you're in the office and you're getting a performance review from your boss, they might say you are on par with all of the expectations that I have for you. You're doing really good. So if you're on par, it's usually a very positive thing. It means you're doing very well. You're meeting the expectations that were set for you. Imagine that you are going to pick some lemons or some apples or some pears from a tree. The first fruit that you're going to pick from the tree is the low-hanging fruit because it's the easiest. And that is exactly where this idiom comes from and what it kind of means. So when you're starting something, sometimes you want to start with the low-hanging fruit, which means the easiest tasks or the easiest things in this problem. So when we say that something is low-hanging fruit, it means it's something that's easy to guess, it's easy to achieve, or it's easy to do.
That is some low-hanging fruit.
You don't want to waste your time inventing something that already exists and already works well. And when we have this situation, we use the phrase, don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Because I was too confident and tried to reinvent the wheel.
For instance, I knew someone that is very high up in business and they still write physical to-do lists, and someone asked them, what kind of software, what kind of apps do you use to manage your tasks and to-do list? And she said, well, I just write them down on paper. Don't reinvent the wheel. So this would mean that the old way of doing something is completely efficient. Don't waste time trying to learn something new in order to do just the same thing. And I think this phrase is really useful as well. Speaking of testing out new ideas, if you want to say that you have to actually use an idea or apply a plan in order to see if it works, you can say it's where the rubber meets the road. If you are into cars or automotives, this is a great idiom for you. It's like saying until your tires actually drive on the road, you won't know if your car works. So maybe your team at work has a plan of how you're going to execute something, and you talk about this plan for many days. If you want to say, we don't know if it will actually work until we try it, you can say, well, we'll see where the rubber meets the road. Make sure you guys try out one of these 12 idioms in your daily conversations. I promise that native English speakers will almost always know what these strange idioms mean, even though they all are kind of weird and have a weird origin. These are so common in everyday language. If you want to learn more strange idioms or just more idioms that will help you advance your English, make sure to check out one of the next lessons on screen. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!